Thanks everyone for being here. I wish we all could be here together during these unimaginable times. It's crazy. Right now I'm in New York City. The sun's about to rise. As Bastian said, I'm Taylor Lawrence. I go by Appleton. I'm an artist, a street artist, a diabetic activist, and I've been a type 1 diabetic since I was a kid. Over 400 million people worldwide have diabetes. We all know many of them, type 1s and type 2, type family. Simply put, many of them are children who are too young for type 1. I was too young for type 1. I think we all are. Too young for type 2 as well. Diabetes is deadly and dangerous. It takes the young, the old. It doesn't care. It takes limbs and lives and breaks hearts. It took my sister's life when she was 7 years old. An older sister died in my mother's arms of a DKA coma. Years later, I would go into the same coma, almost to the day. Fortunate enough, after being in and out of a coma, to wake up in my mother's arms. People still do not know enough about diabetes. I'm always shocked about the lack of awareness in everyday people you meet. Education is still not enough, and I think still not enough to the extent it needs to be out there. Sometimes you have to go the distance with awareness. We do different things. I make art. I've been arrested. You got to put it out on the street to get the awareness of the most amount of people. Street art, to me, has been like hieroglyphics and cave drawings, kind of public gallery, the public art, where all messages endure. My art is about bringing awareness to the struggle of diabetes every day, the nightmare for all of us that we all try to pretend to be happy with daily. Everyone knows the real happy diabetic. It's not easy, and we all know it. And I put my work on the streets for that reason. I've heard from many friends in the past that seeing my work on the street makes them feel less alone with the struggle that we're all in together. Diabetes kills people. It's just too much. I dedicate my work to my sister, Beezy, was her name. And without further ado, I go to my slides and talk through some photos with you all. Trying to see how
Taylor,
yes.
You would just have to say next slide whenever you want the team to advance. I wasn't sure where to start. So next to your picture, you will see your slides and you just say the next slide because we control it from here.
Super. Perhaps slightly out of order. This is dedicated. I call this little girl Blue. That insulin bottle is almost 40 years old. Hate to tell you how old I am. I've saved almost every bottle of insulin that's gone through my system since I was a kid. God forbid anyone in my family broke one of them. I photograph them, I blow them up, and I put them on the streets. This here right now is on 10th Avenue and 22nd Street, or I should say was. Next slide, please. Example of some very, very old bottles. You'll see the labels, you could tell. Next slide. My sister had very light blue eyes. I say this is for her. I use all my work, all my bottles, pieces, anything that has gone through my system has been saved for decades. Some personal thing about it. I'm sure many of us out there collect a lot of diabetic paraphernalia. Next slide, please. Too young for type 1. Lost a childhood by being diabetic. Having too many thoughts. Kids having to think about diabetes and blood sugar. The average diabetic has 120,000 thoughts a day. The average regular citizen with life, family, and everything else has 60,000 thoughts a day. Imagine the weight of that. You don't even know it. It's a heavy burden for children, whether they care to admit it or not. Next slide, please. Too young for type 1. We're in a maintenance world without a cure. It's just a safety pin, a lot of things to keep us going. We know that the wrong decision at the wrong time can really ruin your day. And that's putting it mildly. Next slide, please. My work hits the streets to let everyone know that type 1 diabetes is ever present. Next slide, please. I call this the candy striper. When I was a kid, that's who came by when I was diabetic. When I was coming out of my coma, these nice young people made you feel wanted. So I put the interior of the bottle to represent for them and designs. Next slide. You won the lottery when you became diabetic. It's not the one you want to win. Next slide, please. November 14th is, as we know, International Diabetes Day. And I've been around the world a couple times and like to have put up bottles for global awareness. Of course, a Korean bottle right here. Next slide, please. You've got your Union Jack and our little girl Blue. Next slide. This is for our French. I didn't put the whole world on, but I have many. This was formerly on the West Side Highway in New York City, and somebody grabbed it. With pleasure, I'm glad they did. Next slide, please. This resided in Los Angeles for a good year or so for Japanese diabetics. Next slide. Somehow my German Shepherds always make my street art. I spoke in Lisbon last year at this time, and that's a bottle with the Lisbon flag in the inside. Down below, you can see actually earlier work from many, many years earlier, a row of bottles I put up there, oddly enough, the same spot. Next slide, please. I've decided that the Tin Man already had a pancreas, already had a heart. He needed a pancreas, that he was type 1. Here, he's all discombobulated to show you that daily it's a rough ride. Next slide. There's a commission piece I have going to a nice collector with our Tin Man not so happy. I like to use trains in my imagery. Diabetes is a train you can't stop. It's about the mass production of insulin, loaded with people who are making money paying too much on insulin. Next slide, please. It's a daily battle for our kids, too young for type 1. Appreciate all the warriors out there, all the fighters, all of you people, all of us trying to make it a better place where we're all not alone in diabetes. When I grew up, there were no groups, there was no social activity. You didn't tell a girl that you were diabetic, God forbid. So it was very secretive, and glad to put my work out there to begin to close the circle for many who are still outside of diabetes, wanting to come in and be open with it, accept it, and get on top of it, not afraid of it. Next slide, please. For many, insulin is out of reach. It's too expensive. It's gone up 300%. Now there's different qualities of insulin. Bizarre. You can get amazing insulin, and you can get insulin that's not the best or not the most reliable. Next slide, please. We know what it's about. We know what it's about. Diabetes is about money. I wish it wasn't. Maintenance is a wonderful thing. We have a wonderful love-hate relationship with Big Pharma. Love them to death. Keep us alive with maintenance. But a cure should come soon enough than every 5 years they've told me since I was a kid, or something close to it. And when there is one, who could afford it? And who will it be? There'll be diabetics on the moon. You'll see. Next slide. 300% of insulin. Insulin's almost more expensive than caviar. I actually don't even know the price, but that's the image to show that it is outrageous. Next slide, please. different types of insulin. That's your quick acting. The gold was the long acting. Next slide, please. Very often overprescribed. A dear friend of mine gave me 16 bottles of Humalog. That's how much is wasted by big pharma overprescribing and not getting to enough people. That bottles of insulin lay waste when they could have gone and helped millions of people who have trouble paying for diabetes. Diabetes costs between $20,000 and $30,000 a month. A year in the United States. All the periphery cost aside from health insurance. Next slide, please. Soon, we'll be making our own boycott, our black market insulin. Bathtub insulin, because it's so expensive. It may come to that. Or come to anyone who makes insulin, just like everyone makes a bottle of water. Soon, everybody will make insulin. Maybe that'll bring the price down and keep the quality up. Next slide, please. It's time for a cure. And with that, I say thank you to everyone. Again, I dedicate my cause, my art, my street art to my sister, Beezy. I thank you all. Please stay safe during Corona. The combo, Corona and diabetes, we've got enough to worry about. Thank you. I'm glad to take any questions. Thank you for having me and listening.